As entrepreneurs and investors, we're constantly looking at our revenue, our expenses, but are we truly looking at all of our economics of our business? Are we looking at everything and measuring everything? Or are we just measuring dollars? Today, we're going to talk about the hidden economy within your business, within your investing. And we've got an expert on this, my new friend, Judd Kessler from the Wharton School of Business. And he's written the book, Lucky by Design, the hidden economics you need to get more of what you want. And I love this topic. Judd, welcome to the Wealth Ability Show. And please give us a little bit of your background. It's pretty impressive.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. It's my 15th year there. Before that, I did my PhD in business economics at Harvard Business School and the Harvard Economics Department, and had a year in England. And before that was a Harvard undergrad. The whole time I've been studying economics. And the way that we teach economics to folks at every level is by talking about prices as being the thing that matters more than anything else in markets. So if you've taken an econ class, you've probably heard a professor like me say, supply equals demand. That is an assertion that the way that markets resolve scarcity, the way we decide who gets what, is by letting a price adjust until supply and demand meet. And that is true of many markets, but it's not true of all of them. And it's not true of some very important markets that we play in all the time, both as individuals trying to get what we want and as entrepreneurs or within firms trying to dole out scarce resources that we control. And so the book that I wrote, as you mentioned, Lucky by Design, is about all of these other markets, which I call hidden markets, which operate with other rules.
All right, so let's start right with the basics. What do you mean by hidden markets?
Yeah, so essentially, anytime price isn't going to adjust to decide who gets what, you end up with what economists call excess demand. There's more people who want something than you have available to serve them. And so what ends up happening is that we get some other set of market rules that does the allocation. So this is, everything from, you want to go see very popular artists perform, and you're going to go to a live event, and they sell the tickets for below the price that would be necessary to clear the market. So there's many more people who want to see Taylor Swift perform at the prices she's selling the tickets for than can be served. Similarly, at hot restaurants, it's hard to get a table. It's impossible to get a table. That's a hidden market where you have more demand than you have supply. Anytime you have a fad product, the one this summer was Labubu's. I don't know if that is something that resonates with listeners, but for those of my age, you could think of Beanie Babies or Cabbage Patch dolls, where there's a lot more people who want the thing. And part of what is happening is that there's a limited supply, and we are hearing about it. I learned about Labubu's because of all the stories about how hard it was to get access to them. And so in all of these markets, and it extends this logic of this hidden economics extends to, trying to get into your kid into an elementary school, or getting into college, or the dating market or the labor market, where there's some other set of market dynamics that's happening. It's not just, I pay more and so I'm able to access the scarce resource. And so in all of these cases, to succeed, you need to understand what the rules are that are doing the allocation, and then figure out what the right strategy is.
Okay, so let's take an example of one of the hidden markets you mentioned is let's take a concert. We'll go with the Taylor Swift thing.
That's
okay, so kind of walk us through that hidden market, and so what what you see as the rules there, and how do you adapt to those rules?
Yeah, so live events are great because it's actually one of the settings where you've seen market rules change over time as a result of changing technology. So if you tried to get a concert ticket to the Taylor Swift of 40 years ago, you would have waited in a first come, first serve line outside of a box office or a
Been there,
record
done that.
store. Exactly. And the strategic game that you had to play was, okay, it's going to be costly to wait online. This is one of these hidden costs where I have to waste time essentially hanging around. And that is a cost to me that nobody benefits from. But that is the cost that I have to pay in order to have access to this scarce resource, in order to get a very desirable ticket at a face value price. And so you have to decide when to show up. You have to figure out how to mitigate the costs of being there. Maybe you bring a friend and you're both there together. Maybe you bring warm clothes because you have to spend the night, in the cold weather on the street. But you're making a decision about, okay, how long do I have to wait so that I have a chance of getting access to that scarce resource? And then over time, technology changed and the market rules changed with it. We kept first come, first serve, but what ended up happening was it kind of morphed slowly into a first come, first serve race. So for a while, it was we had credit cards, but we didn't yet have the internet. So people would call in for tickets to telecharge or charge it. And you just kind of keep calling until you got through. And when you got through, you'd be able to buy. And now with the internet, we have Ticketmaster that releases all the tickets for a particular show at a point in time, and you have to be the fastest one to click and get the tickets before other people buy them. And the dynamics have changed. So now the strategy involves, being aware of when the tickets are going to be made available for sale, figuring out, how to be on high-speed internet at that moment in time, trying to click for tickets that you think you can get, even while ticket brokers have programmed bots to buy up as many tickets as they can with as many kind of fake accounts as they can to snag them. But you can see how the market rules are changing. And one of the things that folks will end up doing in those markets is, finding that a lot of the scarce resources have been bought by others and are being resold on secondary markets for high prices. And you might realize that, you have a better chance if you actually enter yourself into some kind of lottery, which is another set of market rules that plays out. And, you enter yourself to try to get tickets at the last minute in a rush lottery, which is what a lot of live events will do to try to expand access. But each of these is a set of market rules, and each of the market rules requires you to understand them and then figure out what the right strategy is to succeed.
Okay, so I mean, and presumably most of these markets then create other markets if they've got this hidden aspect to them. Like for example, your ticket example. Now there's the obvious secondary market. You don't want to wait in line, then you just pay more for that secondary market, and then then if you're willing to pay enough, you can pretty much get any ticket you want. So there's that. I can see that navigation. But how do you determine what the hidden market is and how you're going to get in there when it's not an obvious one, like, online ticket sales?
Yeah. So the key thing with the hidden market is kind of seeing what the exact rules are that are determining what is doing the allocation. So we're used to standing in line. That's a kind of common set of rules that we play. And, we are less used to hidden markets that rely on lottery allocation, although, some of the ones we play in are that. We kind of are, we go through life and we participate in these markets, and we might not always think like, are we understanding the rules sufficiently well to succeed? So, I could imagine when you are putting yourself on a waiting list, say to get access to an appointment with a doctor that you want to see. Do you know how the doctor's office is deciding how they go through the waiting list? Are they calling each person, one at a time and offering them an appointment, and then you get to say yes or no, and you have a certain amount of time to do that? Or are they just emailing everybody on the waiting list who wants a spot, and then it's a first come, first serve race to kind of be the first one to call into the office and get it? And I think we go through life, we don't really think about the rules that are determining these allocations. And that puts us at a disadvantage against people who have thought this through, who know that when you see an email from the doctor's office, you have to respond to it immediately because they're running a first come first serve race, and whoever calls first will get the appointment. And so that might be a minor example, but the idea is that the market rules vary quite a bit across different allocations that we might care about, whether you're trying to get your kid into a school, whether you're trying to get a life-saving organ transplant, whether you're trying to, hire the best talent for your firm. There's some underlying dynamics, and you have to kind of have a sense of how they work to do the best that you can.
So, okay. So I think healthcare is actually a really good example, because I do think that it is a very unfair system. And it does, I mean, every game favors those who understand the rules.
Yep.
Right. And you think of healthcare, it's really terrible to have to think of it as a game, but in fact it is. And if you think about how do you understand the rules, the question is, how do you understand the rules? So to me, you've got a couple of choices. The obvious one is you hire somebody who understands the rules, right? You just put somebody else in there and say, I'm going to rely on you to understand the rules. That's why I frankly have had a job for 45 years as a CPA. I understand the tax rules. Somebody hires me to navigate those rules for them. That is basically what we're doing there. And so that's one choice. But I wonder, does AI give us other choices? Where does AI have that information if we only know how to search it?
So that's a great question. AI is messing with hidden markets a little bit, and I'm happy to talk more about that, particularly on the labor market, which I know entrepreneurs who are thinking about hiring have to contend with this. So I definitely want to talk about that. I think you're absolutely right that there's kind of two classes of these hidden markets. One set of hidden markets, it probably makes sense to hire somebody who's an expert in it, and that is true for lots of markets where the stakes are very high. So in the book, I talk about folks trying to get their kids into private elementary schools in New York City. This is a very competitive market. You could think about this as being as competitive as getting kids into elite colleges. And in those markets, there's lots of navigation that you have to do, because it's a two-sided market where you're trying to signal things to the admissions committees of these schools. They're trying to suss you out. You're going to send messages to them about how excited you are about getting your kid into that school. And those messages might not be credible if you haven't paid a consultant who has a repeated interaction with the admissions committee. And so, if I say to an admissions officer, we will definitely come. If you admit my son, we will definitely join your school. The admissions officer doesn't know if that's true. I could be saying that to every admissions officer at every school. But if I have a high-paid consultant that is advising me, the admissions officer knows my consultant would not let me say that to multiple schools, because that's my consultant's reputation then on the line if I'm breaking a lot of promises. So that's a case where not only can they provide advice, but they can provide credibility that and how you navigate the game. And then there's other cases where, you're not going to hire somebody to investigate the rules, but you can feel empowered. You can ask one or two additional questions. You can ask, am I allowed to enter this lottery multiple times? If my friend enters with me and we each have a chance, can we both win? You can ask, hey, I would like to, be able to get tickets to this event or a table, at 6 o'clock. To the hostess, what time do I normally have to show up? Do people normally show up to get a table at 6 if there's a line? And you can do the research that is necessary to figure out what the right strategy is. And when you care about it, even if it's not a market where there is a consultant who can help you, you can generally learn the information you need to succeed if you are thinking about the market as a market that requires that kind of work.
Well, the interesting thing is now you've just brought up hidden costs, because the hidden cost of that is now you have to take the time to learn, you have to take the time to investigate it, and that's that is actually part of the exchange right there. It seems like that you've got to take the time. I mean, I'll go back to my my simple profession. You can say, hey, you get a notice from the IRS, you're going to get audited. Okay. Well, there are hidden rules to what you do in an IRS audit. There's rules that I understand that most people would never even contemplate. Okay, how you deal with an IRS agent, how you're going to navigate through that, and so there are people who'd say, "Well, hey, AI can just tell me how to do that, and I can go do it. I really don't need professional help." So, what do you say to the? I mean, where's the balance there? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I it's super interesting. I just heard, I think we're at the cutting edge of this research. I heard a talk this week when I was at Wharton. Somebody came and gave a lecture, and what I learned from that, cutting edge research on this is that we are not very good at identifying what AI is good at and what they're not good at yet. So it turns out our predictions about what AI can do well are not that aligned with what AI does do well. And that can become dangerous for us
Yes.
when we think that AI is good at something that it actually isn't. And one of the examples that he gave, which I think it's a researcher named Sendel Mullainathan, and one of the examples that he gave that I found very compelling is we think that AI is good at summarizing text. So if we give it like a long memo and we say, "Can you summarize this for us?" We kind of assume that it does well. And that may or may not be true, but the only way to know that it did well is actually to do the hard thing of reading the full memo to see,
Right.
oh, did it capture all of the content? And so, you know, when the stakes are high, I do not know that I would trust AI to do it for us yet. It is possible that, at some point in the future, we'll be able to validate that, AI is actually delivering. But what was interesting from the research was that, it doing very well on some high level math exam is not evidence that it would do well navigating an IRS audit. And that's something that, behooves us to keep in mind.
Well, and I would add on top of that is that um, the key in AI is always you get a better answer if you ask a better question. And the challenge is that most people don't know what questions to ask. And I think this gets to really the guts of what I'm hearing you say is that, hey, how do you know how to ask the right question? Okay. To know that A, first of all, there's a hidden market. B, it's navigable at all. And C, is it easier? Is it cheaper from a cost standpoint, including time? Is it cheaper to hire somebody or to go in there and research yourself? And then D, how do I actually go about researching
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. No, so I think that's right. And I think, one of the things that is important for both participants in these hidden markets and folks who are designing hidden markets, because one of the things that I talk about in the book is that we are all designers of hidden markets. Whenever there's a scarce resource and a lot of people want access to it, and somebody has to decide who gets it and what are the rules, through which you are able to access it, that's a hidden market. So for us, it's like the market for your time and attention is a very obvious hidden market because there is a limited supply of it. Lots of people want it. They're going to be emailing you. They're going to be texting you. They're going to be, putting stuff on your calendar, and you're going to determine the rules of who can access your time and attention. And in the book, I talk about how we often are not being that thoughtful about how we do those allocations, about how we establish the hidden markets. So I have an
Interesting.
example about the Colorado River, which runs through the American Southwest. And I will describe to you how for a long time they allocated water from the river. And I think it will sound to you a little silly, a little inefficient and inequitable, which is whoever was the first to tap the river to take water out for irrigation or other purposes, when there's a drought, they get their full rights. So whatever, so California in 1901 diverted water from the Colorado River. If at some point, 100 years later, there's a drought in the Colorado, California gets all of their water first, and folks who tap the river later, like the city of Phoenix, Arizona, which is, was
which is
very
where I
small in
live.
1901 and is very big now, they are the ones who have to cut back. Even though
Right.
for Phoenix it's drinking water, and for California it's water to grow alfalfa for livestock to eat. And so
Yep.
if I describe that to you, you'd say like that is not a good way to allocate. That it's called first in time, first in right. It's like we run a race 100 years ago and that determines everything forever. It's like that doesn't sound good. But if I ask you, how do you set recurring meetings on your calendar? You might say, oh, well,
Yeah.
whoever was the first to claim 10 a.m. on Tuesday, they get that slot, every week forever. And, and then if I have something else I need to schedule for next week, I have to slot it in through between the recurring meetings. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, so it didn't make sense for the Colorado River. Is it really making sense for me and my time? And so, I think it's one of these things where we set up these market rules and then we don't necessarily think about whether we are optimizing our allocation of time and attention. If we're giving it to the people who value it the most, if we're giving it equitably, meaning like we are treating the folks who we think deserve our time or would benefit from our time, are we treating them better or worse? Are we treating folks we want to treat equally? Or are we letting a race that was run, months or years ago determine how we spend, time next week, which we might want to optimize?
So it sounds like some of that is just being intentional and you taking charge of what you're calling your hidden markets,
Yep.
and actually not letting somebody else determine that. Don't do it haphazardly. Actually go in there and I'm guessing this is part of what you're talking about, that, hey, you can't let this just happen to you. I mean, all of this is just happening to you. You can't let, you can't get the ticket because it's happening to you. You can't get in the doctor because it's happening to you. And instead, understand that you've got to be intentional and actually go out and make sure that it happens the way you want it to happen.
Exactly. You have a lot more agency in these markets than you think. And that's where the title of the book comes from, Lucky by Design. It's not, you might feel like people are getting lucky when they get access to this stuff, but actually, it was by design. They figured out how to play the game. And, one thing that kind of connects some of the stuff we were talking about is these hidden costs issues that come up. So when I talk about what makes a good allocation mechanism, a good set of market rules for these hidden markets, it's three things. I call them the three E's: equity, efficiency, and ease. Now, equity and efficiency, I've kind of already talked about. Efficiency would be you're using the scarce resources for, their highest value. I'm using my time for the most important meetings. Equity is, I'm treating people fairly. So I'm kind of, I want to spend same amount of time with all of my employees, and I'm making sure that I actually do that because that's, kind of what my intentions are, or all my customers. Ease is the one that I think we often overlook, and it's most in line with the hidden costs that we were talking about before, which is when an allocation mechanism is easy for market participants, it means that getting access to the scarce resource does not require a lot of extra thinking, extra, research, extra ordeals. Like waiting in line for hours is not easy. Figuring out how to strategize or doing research is not easy. So when we design markets, like for our own time and attention, we can design them to be easier on market participants. We can be transparent and say, look, this is how I'm going to decide, which meetings I take this week. So, rather than forcing your employees or your customers to like get your attention with 10 follow-up emails, like that's hard for them. That's adding a bunch of burden within your organization to get access to your time and attention. If you said, no, just, fill out this form and I'll like look at the beginning of the week and see, or whatever the solution is that works for you. But something that, again, as you say, intentionally considers efficiency, equity, and the ease for the folks who are trying to get access. That last one is one that I think we often overlook because we don't experience it if we're designing a market. We're not the ones who are waiting in line for an hour to get, to meet with us. We're sitting in our office and somebody comes in, right? It's a very different perspective that you have to take when you're thinking about a market participant rather than, operating as a market designer.
Yeah, I know you talk about this too, but I think that you're reducing friction for the users so that you don't have to take as much energy. An example that comes to my mind is what JSX, that the quote unquote airline, has done to reduce the friction actually in the market to getting on an airplane, because they have decided, hey, they learn these rules, these hidden rules. If we only have 30 people on a plane, we're a private charter. Even if we're flying on a regular schedule, we're a private charter, and you don't have to go through TSA. So you can actually just go get on the plane, which is a friction, right?
Right.
And as opposed to the airports, that their idea of reducing that friction is to provide nice restaurants so that their failure can be less difficult.
Yeah. Well, I like TSA as an example in this kind of issue of here is this hidden market that gets created where, in this case, it's a line, right? We're waiting in the TSA
Right.
line. But I like the TSA example because it actually reveals something that well-designed markets can do. So well-designed markets can reward market participants who make the resource less scarce. Okay, what do I mean by that? In the TSA context, if you go through TSA pre-check, if you
Yep.
go through the process of getting your fingerprints done and doing a bunch of work on the front end and get qualified for TSA pre-check, you are very fast for the TSA agents, right? You don't have to take off all your clothes. You can leave your belt on. They kind of trust that you don't have a criminal background, so or you don't have enough of one that they're worried about you flying. So you kind of breeze through. And the more people who have TSA pre-check, the faster everybody gets through.
Right.
Like, of course, the TSA pre-check rewards folks who do that with a shorter line and a nicer experience. But it also, with the same TSA staff, you're actually making the whole process take less time for everybody, because the more people doing TSA pre-check, the kind of more resources can be devoted to the folks who don't have it as well. And so by lowering the burden, it actually makes the whole market more efficient. And there are countries, I do a bunch of research on organ allocation, and there are a bunch of countries that have a similar kind of process for deciding who gets access to life-saving organ transplants.
Really?
Chile, China, Singapore, and Israel have rules where when you were young and healthy, before you ever knew whether you'd need an organ or not, if you said, I would like to be an organ donor in the event that I die in a way that makes that possible, they reward you with, if you ever do get sick and need a kidney, say, you will be higher in the line than somebody who at that same point in time, when they were 18 getting their driver's license, said, no, I don't want to contribute. They're saying, look, these folks were willing to make this resource more abundant, make donor organs, available for folks, and we should reward them for that. That will increase the number of organs available. And we see that in Israel when they implemented the rule. We were able to look at data before and after and got a sense of how many more people were willing to sign the donor cards or donate the organs. And the increases were substantial when you actually were giving folks an incentive to do it. And the incentive is benefiting everybody, not just the folks who have the priority from being donors. And so these are the kinds of clever design changes of hidden markets that can make them operate better and kind of make everybody happier who are trying to get what they want from the markets.
Okay, so if you want to do that with your business, and you go, hey, we know there's friction in this, and here's where it is. I'll give you an example where there's friction in my business. The friction is in actually gathering the information to complete a tax return. That is actually the biggest friction in my business. So what would you like? What are 2 or 3 steps that you would suggest a business owner go through to identify and then reduce that friction, make it easy?
Yeah. I the academic in me doesn't want to give a quick answer, wants to ask like a bunch of questions to try to pull out the specific details. So, so the listeners don't have to go through that process. I'll kind of posit some ideas of directions.
Sure.
So one is, if the bottleneck is that, you spend a lot of time when your customers who are supposed to be providing this information are not providing it in a timely way, or not providing it all at once, or I'm sure my accountant, if he's listening, is gets annoyed by me when I'm like, oh wait, I forgot about something, right? So if that's something that's causing a bunch of bottlenecks, then design whatever the rules are, which is I'm going to prioritize for the processing of your return if you can give me X, Y, and Z by this date.
Got it.
Right? I know that not all of the forms will come in, but if you give me 80% of what we think we need by this date, I'll make sure that your return is the first one.
So create a reward.
Create a reward for you, like helping eliminate the bottlenecks that I'm sure come as the filing deadlines get
like
closer.
TSA pre is a reward because you're faster through the line.
Exactly. And so if you can create a reward for folks who are doing the things that make your job easier, and it doesn't, again, the thing with these hidden markets is that you don't have to make the reward financial, which is what we often think, right? I'm going to give you a discount, right. Financial discounts. Like your business might not, the economics of that might not work. And maybe your customers won't accept or won't be happy if you say, oh, I'm going to charge you a penalty if you're late. But if what they care about is jumping to the top of the queue and they want to know what kind of return what their return is going to look like faster, then that is a resource that you control, that you can use as an incentive. Okay, get me your information earlier, or get it to me, all at once, so there isn't another surprise later, and I will move you up in the queue for getting your return filed, and then that will be the reward. And again, doesn't change pricing, but it does change the timing, which might be something that they really value. So that is the kind of thing of like, what are the scarce resources that you control? And if it's, in this case, when you do what, can you reward people by doing things earlier if that's what they want, by getting them to give you things that you need to be more efficient.
Okay. So anything else you'd suggest a business owner, entrepreneur takes to kind of identify and then solve this issue?
Yeah. So before we end, I promised that I would talk about AI and how AI is messing with these hidden markets. And so I want to jump to that, and
right.
We can, which is, one of the things that hidden markets do, particularly for firms, is allocate, identify, and then decide who we interview, who we recruit, who we hire for our jobs. And the thing that is tough in hidden markets for labor is that what we are trying to identify is somebody who will be good for our job, so above our bar, but also somebody who thinks of us as a very good match for them.
Right.
Because we want them to not just be hired and accept the job, but to stay with the firm for a long time. We're going to put them into our production process, whatever that is. We're going to we're going to train them. We're going to maybe give them people that report to them, or put them in part of a team. And it's very disruptive when folks leave. And so the trick is identifying somebody who we like, but also likes us enough to stay. I will point out that when I talk about this in the book, the parallels to, say, the dating market are very strong there, right? You're trying to find somebody potentially who will be with you for the long term. So those who are not hiring or trying to get hired, but are on the other market, the same ideas are applicable. So what is one of the ways that we have historically done that? What we've historically done is we've relied on things like detailed cover letters to explain, why I'm really good for the firm and why I'm, motivated. And that served both purposes. It showed us this person, was above our bar, but also that they were willing to spend a lot of time and energy writing a detailed, thoughtful cover letter. If it takes you hours to do that, to write something very well structured and specific for a particular firm or position, you can't do that for 100 jobs. You can only do that for the few that you care about. Enter large language models like ChatGPT, and now the cost of that particular signal has dropped dramatically. And other changes in labor markets, like it being, click a button to submit an application, making it vanishingly easy to apply, we have a lot more applications. And if you were to look at them, a lot of them would look very good. And so all of a sudden, it's become very hard to identify who is actually interested in this job for the long term. And so one thing that I would advise folks in this position who are looking for candidates, trying to suss out who's going to be good for the long term, is start to rely on other signals, costly signals that cannot be replicated with AI. So are they networking with you in person or on LinkedIn in a way that can't be done by an AI agent yet? Are they coming to industry events and kind of making themselves known? Do you have a referral? Those things that you might not have always historically needed to rely on are becoming more and more important as these other signals of someone's interest in the job have kind of become less and less credible as AI has made them easier and easier to produce.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. So our guest has been Judd Kessler. The topic is hidden economics, and the book is Lucky by Design. Judd, if we want more than the book and want to learn more about what you're doing, where can we go?
So juddbkessler.com is my website. And just follow me on LinkedIn at Judd Kessler, and you'll be up to date on all my research and the book.
Awesome. We've been talking about hidden economics, and when we really get a handle on our hidden economics in our business, and I really think it's a really key here to making our business have less friction, easier for our customers. We're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. We'll see you next time on The Wealthability Show. Thanks for listening to The Wealthability Show. If today's episode gave you a new perspective, remember this: the tax law is not your enemy. It's a roadmap. And when you know how to follow it, you can build real, lasting wealth. If you're a business owner or investor who's tired of overpaying taxes, the Wealthability Accelerator is your next step. You'll have the opportunity to work directly with me for 80% less than my standard rate. And I'll personally guide you through how to change your facts so that you can change your tax. Go to wealthability.com/bonus and apply today. Remember, it's not just what you make, it's what you keep.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.